easily. It'll
My thing was, if no one can curl my hair, because I hate doing it myself.
do it.
I'm just gonna flat iron it. Nice too.
I can curl it if you want. I gotta curl my own hair. I had to wear my feet there.
Yeah, we're gonna be early.
Are you doing anything?
Okay.
Am I gonna be your
Hair makeup?
assistant this
We'll get,
time? I
we'll
can
get
totally
started.
do that.
Jan's mother-in-law
minutes.
and the Olive and Jan. My friend Michelle from my week.
Oh, so she'll be doing
Pastor Chris, you didn't leave us with the game. If you end up watching this, you didn't tell your wife what game we're gonna play.
You have to look here.
You, I know you're not sick. Oh yeah, work.
Where were you sitting?
So we have a game, play a game. It's called everyone sit in these two tables. Go. That's so far, that's so far.
We have to touch you.
So far.
I can't go any closer.
So far.
Fun. I'm gonna go to the back.
Ooh, what a fun game, huh? So fun. Over play musical chairs. All right, so okay, our entertainment will be learning from the Word of God. I'm not gonna attempt to sing, so that's all you.
Alright, guys. We've sung it before, so you should know, just in case, lyrics for your name. Awful. As morning dawns. As morning dawns and evening fades, you've inspired songs and prayers that rise from the to touch your heart and glorify your name. Your name is the strong and mighty tower. Your name is a shelter like the water. Your name, let the nations sing it loud. There's nothing else about to sing but your name. Jesus, in your name we pray. Come and fill our hearts today. Lord, give us strength to live for you and glorify your name. Your name is a strong and mighty tower. Your name is a shelter like the water. Your name, let the nations sing it loud. Nothing has the power to save. Your name is a strong and mighty tower. Your name is a shelter like the blood. Your name, let the nations sing aloud. There's nothing has the power to save. Nothing has the power to save. There's nothing has the power to save. Your
Let's pray. Father, we sung it many times, and the truth remains the same, Lord. Your name is great. There is no other name under which we are saved. And once again, we thank you, Lord. We come before you, we remember these truths, and I pray that you will continue to help us, continue to live our lives in light of this truth. We are saved by you, Lord, and always walk with a kind of thankfulness and gratefulness for everything. Once again, we give you praise. We do so joyfully once again, remembering who you are in our lives. As we sit under your teaching today, we pray that you bless this time. Help us to be ready to hear these things and humble, my God, and intent, my God, on obeying you in this way. We would like us to teach us, we would help us to be on the way in, even for this night. We can, for your glory, my God, we come to all these things in Christ's name.
Thanks, Henry. We're continuing the sermon that Christ preached in Luke chapter 6. We're going to cover verse 27 to 36 today. But to get some context, let's read starting from verse 20. Okay. So Luke chapter 6, verse 20. We'll read up to 36. We may have one volunteer to read that whole section. Please, thank you. Yes.
And turning his gaze toward his disciples, he began to say, Blessed are you who are poor, for yours is the kingdom of God. Blessed are you who hunger now, for you shall be satisfied. Blessed are you who weep now, for you shall laugh. Blessed are you when men hate you, and ostracize you, and insult you, and scorn your name as evil for the sake of the Son. Be glad in that day, and leap for joy, for behold, your reward is great in heaven. For in the same way their fathers used to treat the prophets. But woe to you who are rich, for you are receiving your comfort in full. Woe to you who are well fed now, for you shall be hungry. Woe to you who laugh now, for you shall mourn and weep. Woe to you when all men speak well of you, for their fathers used to treat the false prophets in the same way. But I say to you who hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who mistreat you. Whoever hits you on the cheek, offer him the other also, and whoever takes away your coat, do not withhold your shirt from him either. Give to everyone who asks of you, and whoever takes away what is yours, do not demand it back. Treat others the same way you want them to treat you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. Verse 34. If you lend to those from whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners in order to receive back the same amount. But love your enemies and do good and lend, expecting nothing in return, and your reward will be great. And you will be sons of the Most High, for he himself is kind to ungrateful and evil men. Be merciful, just as your Father is merciful.
Amen. Thank you, Reverend. Now, Jesus is speaking to a large crowd. We see that in verse 17 to 20, where Luke describes that he comes down, he says, stands on a level place, and there are a large crowd of his disciples, which is where he taught, or whom he taught. It says that in a great throng of people from all Judea and Jerusalem, and the coastal region of Tyre and Sidon, who had come to hear him and to be healed of their diseases. So who are these people? This crowd encompasses both hearers, people wanting to get healing, wanting their diseases to be, removed, or if they had a demon possession, they would bring friends, whatever it is. But included both hearers, disciples, and not disciples. Possibly in that crowd, there were Pharisees and Sadducees and scribes. There were people who were just intrigued by what Jesus was doing, and they saw it as a large crowd gathering. He didn't want to hear this guy teach, see what he has to say. So he included just a bunch of people, right? Large crowd of people. There was one point where Jesus taught, and it says that he fed them, and he fed 5,000, which meant that there were probably 20,000 to 30,000 people there listening to him. So this is the kind of crowd Jesus is starting to generate. Okay, so he's talking to a large number of people, and he's teaching them these things. And as we look at Luke and the flow of where we're going and where we are now in the sermon, it's kind of interesting that in chapter 5 and in chapter 6, in the end of chapter 5, there was this kind of questioning about fasting. And Jesus, in that time, teaches them that, hey, the old covenant is not compatible, or the new covenant, the covenant that I'm going to bring, which is faith and salvation through my name, is not compatible with the old legalistic system. And in chapter 6, beginning of chapter 6, we see the start of this kind of animosity towards Jesus. And what is it that they're trying to pick on him, which is working on the Sabbath, right? Working on the Sabbath. And they were upset that his disciples picked off heads of grain as they're walking. They're upset that he healed a withered man's hand. And Jesus addressed these issues. He addressed them head on. He addressed them perfectly. But you see, contrast to that kind of legalistic, do-gooder works lifestyle where you earn your religion, you earn your favor with God, where your sanctification was rated by what you did rather of who you are. Jesus teaches them what it really means to be a believer, what it really means to be a so-called Christian, or in this case, a disciple. And this is what we have to think when we're listening to this sermon, as we listen and what we remember, remember what Adrian taught us last week, where we left off with the Beatitudes, right? And kind of the attitudes of a Christian or a true believer. This sermon, some commentators have said that this sermon is a different sermon. They call the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew chapter 5, 6, 7 as a different sermon as compared to Luke 6. They call this a Sermon on the Plain. It's possibly the same sermon, just written down with different perspectives. We understand that Jesus could have said things many ways, repeated himself in many ways, just like when you teach, when you repeat yourself, you say it in one way, you say it in a different way. And they wrote down what was appropriate to that. And given the flow and given kind of what it says, it's probably the same sermon. If it's not, Jesus said the same multiple times. He was here for 3 years, 900 days more. Probably taught similar things to them. Right? To get a better understanding of what we're seeing in Luke, we also need to kind of flip back to Matthew a little bit. We'll do that just to help us make sense of what Luke is saying. But we'll do our best to stay in the Luke account. Maybe I'll touch this later on. Well, no, you know what? Let's, before we begin, in Matthew chapter 5, verse 38, you can look at that. It says, "You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. But I say to you," okay? And then jump down to verse 43. It says, "You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you." So you see here what Jesus does and what he's doing, and we'll see that in Luke, is clarifying the teaching of the Old Testament and clarifying it to them, because what's happened is over time, the cultural and the Pharisaical kind of influence, it's kind of been watered down. It's been lost. And the essence and the meaning of what God taught originally in the Old Testament, they've lost out on that. Jesus himself told the Pharisees, "You guys focus on the little minute things of the law. You tithe mint and dill, but you forget the bigger things of the law, which is mercy and compassion." So, you see that they lost the heart of it. And Jesus here is clarifying, not changing, because God's words never changed. He's clarifying what the intention was. And we'll see this in Luke. And so this section, we could say, talks about what it means to love your enemies. Okay, what it means to love your enemies. Now, I would say it's not just loving enemies. It's not like, okay, love your enemies specifically. It's how to love even your enemies. See the difference? It's not like, okay, we love our family and we also have to love our enemies, but everyone in between we don't love. It's we love even our enemies, which means, well, the gamut of your love involves everyone. Okay, so we'll look at verse 27 to 28, please. Can somebody read that? Very good. Luke 6, 27 to 28.
I say to you, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who kill you. To one who strikes you.
Oh, that's it. Jesus says, "But I say to you who hear." Now, what is a but for? Right? But to what? One commentator said that the but may be with regards to the Beatitudes, where men hate you and persecute you, but I say to you, love your enemies. Or it could be in contrast to the Pharisees' way of life and teaching, but to that, I say to you. I think both, either one, makes sense. Because here we're going to see what it really means. What Christ really means when he says love your enemies. He'll explain. So, in other words, forget what they taught you or what you think you know. Also, and even if they persecute you, and you are blessed if they persecute you, this is how you should be acting. And he gives 4 commands. 4 commands in this kind of beautiful, poetic rhythm. Right? It says, "But I say to you here, love your enemies. Do good to those who hate you. Bless those who curse you. Pray for those who mistreat you." You see that? Love your enemies. Do good to those who bless those who pray for those who mistreat you. 4 commands. Literally present, active, imperative commands from the Lord. I believe one commentator said this is the first command in the Gospel of Luke by Jesus. And that's interesting. It says, love your enemies. A person who hates you, we're called to love. And he defines what that love looks like. He defines what that love looks like. He says, love your enemies. which means what? Do good, bless them, pray for them. Right? He doesn't leave that up to us. Love your enemies, which is if they hate you, you hate them back, send them flowers and a card, and you're done with it. That's me loving my enemies, right? Oh, loving my enemies is, hey, I can just ignore them and we'll be cordial, and then that's me loving my enemy. He doesn't leave that up to us, because if it was up to us, the flesh would say, as long as there's no conflict, then I have no enemies, right? As long as I have no conflict, then that's me loving my enemy by not having conflict with them. We're going to see this whole section, Christ will define it, and will define it in a way that's inescapable for us. He says, love your enemies. What does that mean to love them? Do good to them, bless them, and pray for them. The good here is a good that is inherent good, which is something beneficial, worthy for them. You know, what we may think might be good might not be beneficial or worthy for them, right? It's qualified here as something that's beneficial or right or well, something that does good to them. An example of this would be Stephen, when he was stoned. How did he react when they dragged him out for preaching the truth to them? They dragged him out. They gather around in a circle. They started throwing stones at him. How did he react? You guys remember? You guys know that story in Acts. Praying for them. When God miraculously frees Paul from the Philippian jail, his chains are unleashed. He just sits there. He doesn't run out. It's like, bam, you suck for beating me up illegally. Right? They beat him up illegally. He was a Roman citizen. He had every right to do that. He could have just gone down and left and said, hey, dude, I'm here. We're here still. We're not, because if he lost the prisoners, he would have, that was the penalty. He stayed there, you ministered to him, you shared the gospel with him, you become saved. That's how you love your enemies. Do good, bless them, meaning speaking well of them, praising them, and pray for them. Christ says, appeal to God on their behalf, even when they mistreat you. Pray for them. Appeal to God on their behalf. This is no stranger in Scripture. This isn't a one-off that Christ says this. You see this in Proverbs 25, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. Romans 12, Paul reiterates this. He even quotes that. He says, verse 17, Romans 12, verse 17 says, never pay back evil for evil to anyone. Respect what is right in the sight of all men. If possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all men. Never take your own revenge, beloved, but leave room for the wrath of God, for it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, says the Lord. But if your enemy is hungry, quote from Proverbs, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, he will heap burning coals on his head. Do not overcome evil, but overcome evil. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. So we see those commands: love, do good, bless, and pray. In verse 29 and 30, we'll see kind of the expansion or the illustration of what this means. And what does this mean? How does this work out practically? Right? Verse 29. Who left with us? Okay.
Sorry, what verse?
29.
Verse 29. To those who strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also, and from one who takes away your cloak, do not withhold your tunic either.
All right. So Jesus says, whoever hits you on the cheek, offer him the other also. Whoever takes away your coat, do not withhold your shirt from him either. So we're supposed to take that literally, right? So when you get beat up, like, oh, hit me again, please. Please, it makes me more of a Christian. Hit me again. Is that, are we supposed to take that literally? You get robbed and you're like, hey dude, you missed my jewels. Come back next time. Here's my address. Or you know the address already. Oh, you forgot my car keys. Are we supposed to take that literally? Because, no, there is some common sense to this. We need to understand what Jesus is saying, right? Because there is some common sense to this. Paul, even when he was mistreated wrongly, he appealed to the government and says, hey, I'm a Roman citizen. Okay, that's not right. We should go through the proper legal procedures for this. You know, he appeals to government, he appeals to the state. You know, I mean, that's not wrong. There's some common sense to this, right? So we cannot assume that we have to take these words literally. There's this, Jesus Christ is saying something for a reason. Jesus himself, when the priests were trying to incriminate him the night before his crucifixion, right? Jesus said, hey, why are you questioning me? Because they're trying to incriminate him. That's not legally right. Let's get the witnesses and see what they say. And the guy said, do you talk to the high priest that way? Boom, slaps him. What did Jesus say? Oh, slap the other cheek. Says, hey, if I've done something wrong, what did you do? Did I do anything wrong with you? Right? It says, if I've done something wrong, bear witness of that wrong. Otherwise, why did you hit me? So even Jesus didn't take his own words literally, right? So we understand it cannot be literal. Matthew 5 might give us a hint as to what's going on. Matthew 5 verse 38 to 42 says, you have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. So what's happened so far is they use this verse from Deuteronomy, a verse to talk about how the government should enact justice, where an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth. If the government judges, you kill their, sheep, we must give one of your sheep back. I mean, that's just good legal procedures, right? But they took this, something meant for the government to enact, to keep justice, okay, to judge rightly. They took this and took it upon themselves for personal vengeance, for personal endeavors. You hit me, here's my other hit, steal my coat, give me that back. They took it upon themselves to enact that kind of vengeance. Verse 39 says, but I say to you, do not resist an evil person, but whoever slaps you on your right cheek, turn the other to him also. So we see the same language. And so what is Jesus talking about? Jesus is talking about Christians are not to seek retribution or personal vengeance. They are not to seek retribution or personal vengeance. Not to take it upon themselves to get revenge. On the other hand, Christ is saying if you are wronged, be ready to be wronged again. Do not pay back wrong with more evil. We'll talk more about this later, but it says whoever takes your coat, or whoever takes your coat, and because we'll see this again, whoever takes your coat and whoever takes your, we'll see it in a couple verses down. This most likely is in reference to some kind of legal action where a creditor takes or gets payment for your debt or whatever, or some kind of thing you got sued for. You got sued for your coat. And Jesus in that says that you've been sued for your coat, then allow him to even take your undergarments, your shirt. In other words, Dharmakatha says, and he says, if they take your cloak, keep loving them, even if they take your shirt. Don't retaliate Do not seek vengeance. Even says there that they themselves are not the enemy, they are the mission field. They are the people that we can minister to by us responding to good in goodness rather than revenge. Look at verse 30. Popcorn?
Verse 30. Give to everyone who asks of you, and whoever takes away what is yours, do not demand it back.
All right. So once again, this is an expansion or illustration of what it means to love your enemies, right? Jesus Christ is giving us these practical things of what to do and how to react, what it means to love your enemies. And here in verse 30, Christian, can I borrow $100? Dude, verse 30, man. Verse 30, dude, I need $100. Everyone $100 here. Verse 30, take it literally. That'd be awesome. All right. Okay. Maybe. Whoever takes away what is yours, do not demand it back. Give another command. Give, which is another command. It says to everyone who asks of you. Now, once again, we need to understand this not to take literally, because there are some exemptions in Scripture. We understand that Psalms, in many Psalms, it talks about how a debtor who borrows and does not pay back, he is wicked. They're likened to wicked men. But the righteous are likened to gracious givers. But the wicked are likened to people who borrow and don't pay back, right? So on the giving end, you are righteous if you give, and you give freely. On the other end, you're wicked if you're a fool that always asks and asks and asks. We see in 2 Thessalonians 3 that Paul reprimands the people who stop working because they thought that the Lord is coming. Stop working. All right, they just became beggars, you know. Come on, guys, you guys provide for me. I stopped working. The Lord's coming. Paul says there in 2 Thessalonians 3, he says, I'm paraphrasing, he's like, tell those guys to work. Have them learn to eat their own bread. Right? So it's not encouraging slothness, laziness, that kind of culture that you give freely to those who ask, even when they're lazy or not willing to provide for their own or work, right? And we understand that we even talked about it in, remember, 1 Timothy. So what is it? Because we find these exceptions in Scripture, so what is Christ saying? If you have means and there's a need, meet it, even for your enemies. If you have means and there's a need, meet it, even for your enemies. We see a wonderful example of this when the lawyer or the scribe came up to Jesus and says, I'm righteous, man. What else do I need to do to get into heaven? Jesus said, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. Well, he skipped the love God part. He was like, I got that down. Whatever. But love your neighbor as yourself. I was like, well, who's my neighbor? What was the example that Jesus gave? Right? To get at the heart of the issue, the heart of his justification for his self-love and sin. That they defined their neighbor as only those who were their friends. But Jesus defines neighbor as what? Those who you meet that are in need. Even if they're a Samaritan person. So this Jew gets beat up, the Pharisee, the Levite, all passing by, but a Samaritan, an enemy of that country, one who would never be associated with one another in a normal sitting and eating area, but now this guy is beat up, in need. The Samaritan meets that need, right? He doesn't send him flowers, a card, and mushy talk. He meets the need, the immediate need that's there. That's his enemy. That's somebody that he would never have crossed. but he crosses his paths with this guy, and he meets that need, and there's a need, and he has the means to meet it, so he meets it. He meets it graciously. Right? He heals his wounds, puts him on his donkey, puts him in the hotel room, and says, "Hey, I'll pay you back for whatever else that he spends on," and helps him heal. And Jesus said, "Now that's your neighbor. That's your neighbor. The neighbor is the one who you encounter in your path, in your circle, that has a need, and you meet it." Similar thing here, right? Give to those who ask of you, even if that's your enemy, even for your enemies. And it says, "And whoever takes what is yours," and here I think theft is in mind, right? The first one being in a legal kind of pursuit. Here, the same thing. Whoever takes what is yours, right? Theft is in mind here, and he says, "Do not demand it back." It's possible that Christians were persecuted, mistreated, maligned, and their possessions taken or confiscated. It says even those people do that to you, even if it's not right, even if it's illegal, even if it's not, doesn't do justice, put it in the back. You see, in all these aspects, whoever hits you on the cheek, offer him the other also. Whoever takes away your coat, do not withhold. Give to those who ask of you. And whoever takes away what is yours, do not demand it back. You see that there's an underlying thing there that's kind of happening. It's heavenly reliance on God. It's a reliance on God that will repay back. It's a reliance on God that will deal with vengeance for the sinners and the unrighteous. There's a reliance on God to do his work and for us not to take vengeance, to do what is right, to do good, so that we can bear his name and have opportunities for the gospel, even for your enemies. I'm going to stop here. I know a lot of this is kind of hard to process. I've been processing it for weeks. It's still hard to process. So, I'm open to questions later, and we'll talk more about this. But let's get through the thing and kind of just, let's see where the argument is being built. So, look at verse 31. Okay. Robert Christian.
Treat others the same way you want them to treat you.
So here we are, kind of the golden rule, some may call it, right? It's the summary of kind of summarizing what it means to love your enemies. Treat others the same way you want them to treat you. This is essentially another way of saying love your neighbor as yourself. But it goes beyond that. Because when we look at this, we say, treat others the same way you want them to treat you. What's your natural fleshly reaction? I will then treat them the way I want to be treated, and they will thus treat me the way I. Tell me that's not what you're thinking, right? Right? I know it. It's our flesh. When I was studying this, I was like, yes! No. Because we'll look at verse 32 to 34, we're like, no. Christ knows our hearts, and he corrects it right away. Because it's exactly what you're thinking is what I was thinking when I was studying this. Sure, we treat others the same way, and I expect them to treat me the same way, right? That's kind of how we do this, right? This sense of reciprocity, the sense of this exchange, of this barter of like-mindedness. But Christ says this, and he'll qualify it in verse 32 to 34, we'll see that. We'll expand on it, what that really means. But this is not with the sense of this, it's a reciprocal kind of exchange. Not at all. He tells them, love, do good, bless, pray, give. What we see too is that Usually the hindrance to us doing these things is because of pride, because of the sense of vengeance, because of the sense of entitlement. And the other part is that we just love stuff. Those are the two things. I'm looking at it and it's like, this is about those two things. Pride and us loving our stuff. But Christ in his teaching says, this is what it means to love your enemies. You humble yourself and you give your stuff. So how does he qualify it? Verse 32, 33, and 34.
If you love those who love you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. And if you do good to those who are good to you, what benefit is that to you? For even sinners do the same. 35, right? And if you lend to those whom you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? Even sinners lend to sinners to get back the same amount. But love your enemies.
That's it. That's it. Just 35. 34. I'm sorry. 34.
Okay.
So you see the mic drop here by Jesus. Treat others the same way, okay, but how? Okay. Treat others the same way that you want to be treated, but how? Right? All the same theme and all the same flow. You see this parallelism, right? Or the contradicting. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? If you do good to those who do good to you, what credit is that to you? If you lend to those who expect to receive, what credit is that to you? And they all end with even sinners, for even sinners, for even sinners. Love, do good, and lend. And the credit here is not some kind of a bank credit, like debt. Credit meaning graciousness. What favor is that to you? What grace is that to you? And we naturally think of this kind of reciprocal relationship, right? I said that earlier because it's fleshly to us. It was common into the ancient world. It's common even into our society now, where we do something good to someone because we owe them because they first gave to us, so we kind of feel like we owe them. There's also the sense that we do something to someone, do good, lend, give, because we know that we will expect something similar in the future. They have the capacity to do it. They are known to do it. So we kind of, that's kind of how Sarah gives gifts. Yeah, Sarah. Yes. I said it. You're not here. Even if you watch this, it's the truth. Okay? I'm just taking it on her because I'm my sister. But you kind of like, okay, what did they give me? I must give them the same amount. Or if I don't, I feel like I'm such a shameful person. Right? That's kind of our fleshly mentality. But, and that's called quid pro quo. Right? Quid pro quo. We operate on that kind of basis. Give to me, I give to you. What is Jesus saying? What is Jesus saying? To act like that, even the way you love your enemies, and we're talking about loving enemies, right? So that's everyone even, because this is how we should act even to our enemies, right? If we act like that, where we love or do good or lend and expect something in return, who are we acting like? We're acting like the world. Sinners. We're not acting like Christians. We're not acting like gospel people. We're not acting like Christ's disciples. We're acting just like the world, because the world does that. Easy for them. They do that all the time. But if you're a Christian, you cannot act like the world. You must be different. How will the world know you are different? You don't expect reciprocal. You don't expect an exchange. You don't expect a favor back. Can you imagine? That's when I read, I was like, that's hard, because we have those tendencies. But that's like acting like the world. Can we see that? Isn't Christ so clear? What favor is that to you? Because even sinners do that. Jesus gave another example in Luke 12:14 about this wedding guest invitation. He says, you want to be awesome? Invite those who cannot pay you back. Invite those who are poor and lame and weak and sick. And you'll be rewards in heaven. Not the wedding guests that are rich and whatever, where you expect something. Oh man, we act like that, right? And then we hate them when they don't reciprocate. We hate them for it. They become our enemy. How low can we go? You guys coming to my birthday party, I'll treat you guys out to dinner. What do you expect a gift? I'm paying for dinner. Right? I'm paying for dinner. We kind of live like that. How are we better than the world? When we act like that towards our friends. And then God calls us to act like that towards our enemies. So, and it says here, if you lend to those who you expect to receive, what credit is that to you? And to clarify that, it's literally it says, if you expect to receive back the same. And we understand that it's good if we do borrow, as Christians we should pay back, right? But we should never lend on the basis of someone having the ability to pay us back. You know, we don't lend on expecting them to pay us back and knowing that we're only going to lend because I know you're going to pay me back, but you have a need and you're a Christian or whatever, you have a need, you're my enemy, you can't pay me back, so I won't lend to you. You know what I mean? That's how the world works. They work off the basis of your credit score, right? Then you're deemed worthy of being lent to. But we cannot operate like that. Okay, that's enough clarification. All right, two more verses. We'll stop with us getting beat up. Why do we study Luke? We should have just studied like Lamentations. We just all cry all the time. I don't know. I don't know. All right, here we are. Here we are, right? So, verse 35.
Jan.
Jan and Jan.
Love your enemies and do good and lend, so that you might be rich, and the reward will be great, and you will be sons of the Most High, for He is kind to the ungrateful.
Amen. You see the repetition. If you haven't seen the repetition, you're not listening. Love your enemies, do good, lend, rinse, repeat. Okay, many times. You see this repeated summary of what we just learned, summary of what we just read. Christ is a great master teacher. And in that he says, love, do good, lend, expecting nothing in return. And he gives the reason why. He gives the reason why. Your reward will be great. I love this quote. He's a little dense in the way he writes, but in the Gospel of Luke commentary says, those who act without expectation of return, even on behalf of their enemies, will be rewarded. Now, however, the reward does not consist of acts of gratitude from the recipients of their benefaction. Rather, God rewards them. In this new economy, however, the patron gives without strings attached, yet it is still repaid. Now by a third party, God, the great benefactor, the protector and the benefactor of those. I just thought that was beautiful. You know, we do these things, we love our enemies, we lend, we give, we meet their need, we do good to them, not because we expect something in return from them, the sinful and evil world, which is our enemies, those who probably hate God, or not even our friends or believers, but we expect return, and God promises return or reward in what? From Him. From Him. It is Him we are accountable to, and it's Him who will reward us. Him alone, no one else. Not the praise of men, not the money of others, but God. The second reason he gives, he says, do this because you will be the sons of the Most High. In other words, you will show yourself, or you will, the will be is actually to have the quality of being. That's what that means. So you will show yourself to become sons of the Most High. When you act this way, when you act this way, you should, no, I'm sorry, not when you should act this way because one, you will be rewarded. Two, you will show yourself to be sons of the Most High. Now, who is that, sons of the Most High? God. God, right? Same phrase used in Luke 1:32, referring to Jesus, right? Sons of the Most High. God. You'll be rewarded and you will show yourself to be sons of the Most High. And Jesus appeals to God's character as the basis of this. He says, because for he himself is kind to ungrateful and evil men. Why should we do this? Because God himself is kind to ungrateful and evil men. He bestows even the wicked who hate him, who deny him, who despise him. You know what, guys? They're still living. Some of them are successful in this world and they are able to walk their dog, go to the park, breathe, eat good food, whatever, but they're haters of God. Isn't God a merciful God? He gets like, everyone that hates me, God, die terrible, terrible death. So Jesus appeals to God's character, himself, his character, that he himself is kind to ungrateful and evil men. Not because this is what Jesus does, but this is who Jesus is. This is how he loves. Last but not least, verse 36.
Be merciful even as your Father is.
Maybe this is for those who are like, just tell me what it is. Like 6 words or less. There you go. Be merciful just as your Father is merciful. There goes your summary. And in that pact, all of this, right? All of that there. Okay, you want that summary statement? Conclusion? Okay, if you're going to remember one thing this whole night, that's that. It packs all of that. Be merciful. You're called, you're commanded to be merciful, just as your Father is merciful. Mercy, he shows compassion, he shows love, he cares for those who even don't love him. See that? Even Christ on the cross, those crucifying him, beautiful thing, that's actually only recorded in Luke, where Christ says, Father, forgive them, for they don't know what they do. What a wonderful kind of close to that. Christ himself, the perfect example. Him dying on the cross, he, the Son of God, proved to be the Son of the Most High. We see it unfold in Scripture, yet denied, yet mistreated, yet maligned, beat up without a cause, ask that God forgive them because they have no idea what they're doing. And for those who are true believers, who have a hope other than this world, who have understood the gospel in our own sinfulness, why can't we lower ourselves, humble ourselves? Why can't we let go of the things that we have in this world for the sake of those, even those who are our enemies? We have a greater hope. We have a rewarder. We have somebody that will enact vengeance for us. Not us, but God himself. We know better. It's kind of like we know better. We have God. We live in age where vengeance is exalted, is it not? Where it's kind of celebrated, where they become heroes and heroines. Watching Thor Ragnarok, him and Hulk. What are you guys called? We're the Revengers. I was like, so cheesy. Well, I'll use that in one teaching. Celebrated, right? And we laugh at that. But that cannot be our way. So, Stan, I mean, how do you how do you react when you hear such hard teaching from the Word, specifically from the Lord Himself? How do you react? For me, I'm like, I wish I taught the Beatitudes. That's what I was thinking. More shock, more striking, kind of struck me, kind of shocks me, especially as I dig deeper into the Word and kind of unfold and kind of look at, okay, is this what He's really saying? I'm like, yeah, that's what He's really saying. It's not what I think He's saying, and I hope that He's saying, but that's what He's really saying. Then I realize my own sinfulness. I hope this opens up your own sinfulness in your own heart when you have this kind of tension. If you're listening today and you feel tension, that's good. That's sin. Okay? That's sin in your heart. I'm just letting you know, when you feel this kind of tension, that's sin in your heart, fighting your flesh, and you're saying, oh man, I want to be like this, but oh man, I can't be like this. This is so hard. What are you doing? If you come here and you're like, I got that. Man, I didn't do my job, or you're not saved. But you should feel some kind of tension. You should feel some kind of tension. Because the Spirit in you is trying to fight for more God-glorifying things, but your flesh, living in this world, it's like, no, that's hard, right? That's how I feel. I recognize my own sin. If you guys were clueless of that tension, that's sin in your heart. That's sin in your heart manifesting itself because it's hard to do. Sometimes I feel defeated. But we must remember, and we must be encouraged that, yes, the same Spirit that was in Christ, who said, Father, forgive them, is the same Spirit that was in Stephen, who said the same thing when he was being stoned. The same ones who were the apostles when they were mistreated, is the same Spirit at work in us. The same Spirit at work in us. And listening to the Word like this and understanding and learning from it strengthens our spirit. And what we should do is learn to call out to God, God, I cannot do this. I don't want to do this. I cannot act this way, but help me, because I know by your Spirit, not only did your Spirit forgive me, make me justified in your sight by exchanging our lives. When God looks at me, I see Christ, but He empowers me to live the life that you have set out for me. There's victory in us. Tap into it. We have to rely on the Spirit. You have to strengthen the Spirit. You have to rely on the Spirit. You have to strengthen it by the Word and prayer. You gotta trust God. Without these sinful tendencies in our heart, He can teach me how to act like these, act like this, learn. You know. All right. So, questions, concerns, comments. Jan.
So, question. Verse 30.
I explained that you weren't here.
I wasn't here yet. That's what I'm asking. First half of that, give to everyone who begs from you. Right? And then on 31, and that's wish that others would do so to them. So, just asking. That person who begs from you, not to play God or whatever, you deem them, let's say, as undeserving because they're lazy. So what happens then?
And but Proverbs also say about sluggard, right? But
Right, and we have to learn, and I hope that made it clear that this is not to take literally in a non-thoughtful way, where if somebody is lazy, if somebody is a sluggard, even in 2 Thessalonians it says, reprimand him, teach him to work with his hands, earn his own bread, and work, right? We do not encourage laziness, and so we have to take the whole world holistically. And if we see a pattern of laziness, sure, we can meet their need, but we must encourage. And this is love. This is true love, because true love relies on the truth, and that's the truth of God's word, right? In its whole, we have to then encourage them. Hey, laziness is a sin. To keep doing this is sinful. To confront them with the sin of what their actions are, to confront them with the gospel. We don't want to enable sin. Right? And imagine if we realize that every time you give, you find out, hey, they're using it for drugs. I would stop giving. Let them see the magnitude of the sin of it. Like, hey, I want to give to you. Not that you're doing drugs. Hope not. You know, like college life, you know, I don't know what's legal and what's not. Okay, but Roxanne, I love you, and I want to help you with your needs. You gotta get clean, because I cannot support you in you feeding your own flesh. Right? Maybe that means you feed them food instead. But you see, you're still caring for them, but you're caring for them in the right way. We must not take this as a blanket statement, because when you care for them in enabling their sin, what are you actually doing? You're not loving them. You're loving them like the world does, which is to push them away so they can stop asking, but not actually try to meet their greatest need, which is the recognition of their sin and their need for the gospel. And especially with an unbeliever, we should always approach it that way, as a opportunity for the gospel. So let's say you had a really heart for the homeless in LA. You know, how would you go about doing that? You wouldn't just go start handing out $20 bills. Like, God loves you, God loves you. Read the Bible, read it sometimes. And then you feel good about yourself, like you're philanthropic macho man that gave to those who love them, right? I don't know. You give, but there's an intention behind it. Maybe you give them food, and you minister to them with the word, and you say, hey, are you using? You got to get off that. That's sin. You know, and so you know, there's we have to be careful. Sometimes we mask our laziness or our indifference towards somebody's needs by not actually by just blanket money, right? I want to do that. But it's interesting how all these examples are always about pride and stuff. Because I think what we hold dear is what we love. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah.
Or did I confuse you more?
no, I just wanted to hear.
Okay, cool. But you can watch the stream and then don't tell Sarah to watch it. She's gonna get mad. I was just joking. Don't do it, guys. Now when I say don't, you guys are gonna do it. Remember, watch the stream. Pretty Mike said something about you. She's like, oh man.
You didn't like Mrs. Yuri.
Any other questions?
The scripture applies to the church setting where you might get it so hostile to each other, regard each other.
But that's even worse, right? That's even worse. Because here the call is to love even your enemies. What more your family? You read 1 John, you see that not learning to love in a sacrificial way for those who believe, you're not a believer. And it's even more strict. If you cannot love the family of God, John himself says, if you cannot love those who you can see, how do you say you love those who you cannot see?
It's harder to love that.
It's harder when it's family. It's harder when it's family.
Yeah.
So, but would we be able to really write the point to this scripture?
Okay. When we're talking about the church, there's even more scripture to point to. Command of love. 1 John, John 13, John 15, Just the whole book of 1 John. Ephesians chapter 5, verse 2. I can't have it here somewhere. Love others. Paul calls us to love the church as Christ loved the church. It's like, oh my gosh, okay. Failed. F for that. It's like, oh my gosh, okay. Christ loved the church in a self-sacrificial way, okay. Also love the church that way. God just take me now because I'm just sitting. So it's even more. Hopefully that answers everything. This is the first, but I think in the context of church, there's more.
I had a friend tweet the pray for your enemies. And this person was in somebody. He tweeted that verse.
Yeah.
Very hard to.
And that's cool. I mean, that's okay. It's not like it's out of context. It's like there is a sense that you appeal to God even for your enemies. It's sad that you regard the church as your enemy, not as a place for admonishment, care, and maybe correction, because you have the same spirit. Because in a church setting, if they call themselves to be believers, you can appeal to the truth, to the single source of truth. This is our source of truth, and this is where we're at a foundation. With the world, you're like, you got no sense. It's like, whatever you believe, I believe, we believe, everyone loves. Be proud about it. There's no appeal to like this sovereign truth. And so it is for us to actively, and in doing so, we may have an opportunity for the gospel.
One question.
Okay.
So what is like, okay, not necessarily your enemy.
You have to give names. Yeah. All questions now, there must be a name attached to it so I can think of a face. I'm kidding.
But it's someone who kind of like, for lack of a better term, annoys you. So, okay, let's just say.
So if you annoy Michelle, you are now an enemy.
So like, let's just say they annoy you, right? But you're not at all hating them or anything like that.
Mhm.
But they ask you a favor that you would normally do for somebody that you don't get annoyed by.
Wow. Yes.
I've never experienced this.
Asking for a friend.
I'm asking for someone else. It might be.
For Sarah. See Sarah. For Sarah.
Okay, so yeah, that's my question, Leah. In that way, do you have to extend yourself when they're not your enemy?
I think you answered it yourself. Right? Should you can see. I like it. I love this happens to us. This happens to me. But I'm in the pulpit, so I get to be pretend holy. I get to pretend holy. Okay. I like it. You see the justification. You're kind of like the tension behind her words. Like, I would do it normally for someone, but not her. Do I have to do it for her? Like, you kind of answered it. Like, if you're already differentiating, there you go. There goes the sin. Yeah.
Okay.
If you love those who love you back, what good is that to you? Love those who love you back. What good is that to you? Now, I know we kind of touched on this, but it's not that love means mushy gushy wall. Okay, I have to love the church. I have to invite everyone. And it's not love. What it means though is that you meet the needs of the person that it's there. That you go by and you see the person crying and you're like, he's my enemy, or they annoy me. Forget that. You have the capacity to minister to them. Like, forget that person. If you're starting to judge like that in your own heart, then you sin in your own heart. I mean, we know we've all done that, right? See somebody walking down the hall, I'm like, oh man, they're gonna ask me for a favor, fix their computer or something. I'm running away. Get in the car, kids. Let's go.
What if it's not a need? Like it's a want.
I love this. What do you think, Alex? Talking about me. I mean, it really depends. It really depends, right? They're like, hey, I need to borrow your car. Okay, you have a car though. Well, I just want to use your gas. Okay. Okay? Here's 20 bucks. What I like your car.
Okay.
Let's talk about this. You know, let's just have a discussion. If they really just, maybe I might give grace for that. But you know, there's just silly people like that. You have to give grace. You have to give grace and just trust in God. If they crash your car. Oh my gosh.
I
Right.
think that's the bottom line.
Right. There's things like that. There's things like that. There's things like that. Remember, God will repay you back. And God does the same thing for us. See, it's tough. As I said, I'm pretend holy now, but it's hard, man. So I tell you, when I was reading, I was like, man, why I gotta read this? All right, so here I am. I did my best, so I'm saying I do this. I do feel the own sinfulness in my own heart, and I weep. But I praise God that words like this make us sensitive to our own. No, like words like this break your self-righteousness, does it not? You think you're righteous? You think you're a believer? You come here and you're like, man, I go to Bible study, right? Yeah. You read this like, oh my gosh, maybe I shouldn't have gone to Bible study. Because I'm less righteous than when I walked in here. Okay, and that happens. That happens to me. Cool. Thanks. Good questions.
Yeah.
Big size. All right. There's no other questions. We'll continue. I think next week we still have a lesson. Is it you, Alex? Adrian? Oh, that's Chris. He's doing judging. Oh yeah, he's doing don't judge. I love that one because most commonly misused verse. Yep. Don't judge me. Oh really? Now we know the context.
Oh, maybe so good. Maybe I'll skip my graduation.
Well, this is good. Oh, we'll stream it.
Yeah.
I'll stream it. Okay. I'll skip your graduation soon. But that's happening next week.
No, I've been
So.
wanting to learn that.
Yeah.
I could read it.
Most commonly misinterpreted verses. One of the most commonly misinterpreted verses, right? You guys all know. People don't judge me, Bible says don't judge. All right, we'll find out. Okay. If you come next week, you'll know. Then no one can throw that in your face anymore. All right. Or are we not supposed to judge at all? Zero. Come find out. I'm not studying yet. I'm done. I need a breather after that lesson. I need to recover. Okay, so let's break up in groups. The guys are already sitting at one table. The girls are already sitting at one table. Do you all prefer that? Boy and girl, or you guys want to split it up? It's good. Okay. Jack, crossover. Rhiannon, crossover. And we're good to go. Swing the other way. Swing the other way, Rhiannon.
Oh, that's clean. Is that Randall? Alex? What? Alex?
Hey, but I would do it for anybody.
They swap.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday.
Oh, no. He's one of these. Yeah.